Hello, my magical friends, and welcome back to another video, a Kingdom Hearts discussion video at that. It's been a while since I've done one of these, so I'm a little rusty, but that's okay, just bear with me. Today I wanted to talk about a certain part of KH3 that's been living rent-free in my brain over the past few months. That being Riku's sacrifice. And I just want to mention how foolish I was for taking this moment in KH3 at face value, and honestly, I took a lot of moments at face value. When it was first brought up that Riku's sacrifice was completely skipped over in Remind, I was like, LOL, I guess they thought it would be too redundant to show it again. It doesn't mean anything. Yeah, no, that's not it at all. But granted, I was going through a weird period of my life during that time, and I don't think I had the mental capacity to really think critically about the events of Cage 3. But now I have my reading glasses on and I'm ready to speculate and theorize. And before I get into this, I should explain why I wanted to make a video about this specifically. First reason being that I'm a little behind on the theory side of the community. I really didn't get into Kingdom Hearts theories until last year, and at the beginning of this year, I was introduced to the Sleeping Realm theory for the first time. It's been out for like 4 years now, and I had never heard of it, so when I read it, of course I was mind blown and super mad at myself for not reading it sooner. After that, I just fell down a rabbit hole, especially in regards to Riku's role in the narrative. And although I've seen a multitude of Twitter and Tumblr posts, I was disappointed that I couldn't really find any YouTube videos talking about the Six Hearts No Sacrifice theory. And as of me revising the script right now, I have discovered a total of one. There are people who mention it, of course, but I was hoping to see more videos completely dedicated to this topic because I just had so many questions that I thought more, probably smarter people could help me answer. Which leads to my second reason. I just want to talk about it. I don't have anyone IRL I can bounce ideas off of, and I'm still a little too shy to just put all my thoughts on socials. So I thought, why not make a video so I could just get it all out of my system in one go and never look back? Hopefully. So with that being said, let's get into the discussion. And we'll begin with the recap of what happened in base Kingdom Hearts 3.
It can't be. No.
Aqua! Whoa! Sora! They're gone. Kyrie, Donald, Goofy, the king. Gone forever. What do we do? Without them, all my strength came from them. They gave me all of it. Alone? I'm worthless. We've lost. It's over.
Sora, you don't believe that. I know you don't.
Riku's death here is a spectacle. I mean, compared to everyone else just being scooped up and swallowed by the demon tide, which is still terrifying, by the way. But when I saw this scene for the first time and then later beat the game, I was a little confused. I witnessed this dramatic showing of Riku's death and was like, why would they have Riku try so hard just for him to die anyway? Why would they do this if Sora's just gonna go back in time and fix everything? Is it just because Riku's an important character and so they wanted him to go out in a big way? Do they like to see Sora suffer, make the Riku stands cry? Well, knowing what I know now, they're obviously emphasizing Riku's sacrifice in this way for a reason. And even though Riku was exerting all this effort, maybe he actually wasn't meant to succeed. The point of the scene isn't to show the presence or lack of physical strength Riku actually has, is to display his strong conviction. That's a key term right there, so keep it in mind. And it's Riku's words and sacrifice that help bring Sora back.
Oh, where am I?
There's nothing else beyond this. You've wandered here more than once before on your visits to the Station of Awakening, but I let that slide. The edges of sleep and death touch, and one can't help the occasional crossover.
Wait, death?
Yes, the natural end for those whose hearts and bodies perish together. But some persist and arrive here.
My heart and body perished? Does that mean...
Something is holding you here, refusing to let you go. Usually, only a heart can reach the final world. But since you've clearly managed to retain some kind of form, that can only mean your body was cast into this world as well.
Okay, so... then if I can find my body, that means I'll be able to go back?
Precisely. But there's a lot of you to find. You're going to be busy.
The first thing to note here is the Final World logo and how it parallels the animation of Riku taking his stand against the demon tide. I'll try to show it here the best I can, but I highly recommend checking out the link to a post in the description below that shows a proper breakdown and comparison of the animation. And if you're still skeptical about this being intentional, well, that's fine. We still got more to talk about. But if it is intentional, I think this once again emphasizes the importance of Riku's sacrifice. Specifically, the point that Riku's sacrifice has something to do with Sora ending up in the final world in the first place. And that's where the cutscenes with Naminé and Nameless Star come in.
Sora?
Yes?
It's me, Naminé.
Naminé?
I'm so glad that you managed to hold on to who you are.
Why are you here?
I was in Kairi's heart, but then we were struck by a powerful darkness, and I woke up here.
And Kairi?
I can feel her heart. She's fighting with all her strength to keep you from fading away.
So the reason I retained my form in this place...
It's because she's holding you together. Go to her. day.
Oh, cool! You can talk!
You look like a person.
Oh.
How is it that you retain your appearance? Are you special?
I'm a little hazy on the details.
As are we all.
So, whose heart are you?
No one's anymore. They took away my name. Everything about me.
No way! They couldn't have taken away your heart.
Only because it pines for another.
Yeah? Someone's coming for you?
I cannot be certain. He's been changed beyond recognition. His heart replaced with another's. But were he to regain his old self again, he would be distressed by my absence. So I choose to wait here, where he can find me.
Oh. Good. You have to believe.
Believe? Oh, you mean know in my heart he will return? Without any proof?
Exactly. Believe. I thought it was all over for me, but a friend of mine looked me in the eye and said, "You don't believe that."
Interestingly enough, these scenes are missable. When I first played through Cage 3, I actually missed these myself, and honestly, if I had seen them, the implications probably would have flown over my head anyway, but the fact that they're missable is kind of telling. So when we talk to Naminé, we learn that Kairi is holding Sora together, and she's the reason why Sora retained his form in the final world. And then when we talk to the Nameless Star, we learn the importance of believing, and Sora recalls Riku's last words to him as a way to parallel Riku and the Nameless Star. And I want to note that in Japanese, Riku tells Sora, "I believe in you, you won't give up," which sounds a lot more impactful than "Sora, you don't believe that, I know you don't," in my opinion. But in Japanese, the parallel is even more apparent as they both use the same wording. And another key topic seems to be heart in this conversation, since she mentions her heart pining for another, and that same another, who we now know as Yozora, had his heart replaced. She also calls attention to the fact that her appearance was stolen, yet Sora was still able to retain his, which we know the reason for thanks to Nami. And don't you remember Chirithe's words when Sora arrived? Death happens when someone's body and heart perishes together, and those who persist end up in the final world. Usually, only a heart can reach the final world, but because Sora managed to retain his form, that means his heart and his body both reach the final world. Do you understand what I'm getting at? They make it a point to separate these two parts of your existence, which they've already done up until now in the series with the existence of Heartless and Nobodies. But within the scope of Cage 3, two people, two separate actions are responsible for Sora's persisting existence. If I had to explain it myself, I would say that Riku guided Sora's heart to the final world, and Kairi was essentially the glue that kept Sora's heart and form together. But the point is that Riku has a role here despite failing to protect Sora. He didn't just die for nothing. And Riku being directly referenced in the missable Nameless Star conversation is a pointed hint that Riku protecting Sora wasn't a physical action, but an emotional one. Anyway, let's keep going to the last bit I want y'all to take in.
Look for the light in the darkness. May your heart be your guiding key.
Sora, you don't believe that. I know you don't.
Riku! Riku! Answer me! This is Herc's world. Is Riku here?
So we see Riku die again. It's really telling that they decide to start the scene at this point and not include everyone else being swept up by the demon tide, with the opposite happening in Remind. It's as if they really wanted to focus on this particular scene. Well, after this, Sora wakes up inside the demon tide. He sees this bright ass light, and he immediately calls out to Riku, follows the light, and ends up in Olympus, which happens to be the very first world we go to in Cage 3. And is the home of Hercules, who, in the movie sacrifices himself to save Meg's life and then regains his godhood in return. The movie with the message of, it's not about the size of your strength, but the strength of your heart. And it's also right after this world we see Riku in the realm of darkness with Mickey, talking about the strength to protect what matters and how it comes from caring about someone. And in an interesting kind of foreshadowy parallel, we see Riku not even using his Keyblade to defend himself from the smaller demon tide, in contrast to later on facing an even stronger demon tide head on. Like, wow, the connections sure are connecting.
Sora,
Kairi! I found you!
You see? I had no doubts that you'd pull through.
The light in the darkness. It was you! You're the one who kept me from fading away!
All I did was believe that you wouldn't.
I feel strong with you, Kairi.
The others are ahead. Come on. I told you, Sora. You're safe with me.
Oh. Yeah! Whoa! Oh.
You okay?
Yeah. Thanks, Kairi. Oh. It did work!
Of course! Now point us back at those guys.
Right!
So once Sora defeats the Lich and returns everyone's hearts, he's back in the tunnel again. And we get to see Kairi. Not only that, but Sora thinks the light in the darkness, the light from when he first entered the tunnel, is Kairi, despite not that long ago calling the light Riku and having nothing in between then and now to disprove that assumption other than Kairi literally just being there and telling him that she knew he would pull through. I wonder if those missable cutscenes kind of influenced the interpretation of the scene here. That's rhetorical, by the way. So the last thing I want to bring to your attention in this section of the video is that we don't really see Sora's reaction to seeing Riku alive and well. Like, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but seeing how dramatic and emotional Riku's sacrifice was and how worried and desperate Sora acted after seeing it, isn't it strange we don't get to see any confirmation of relief from Sora? Or maybe we could at least get to, I don't know, see Riku's face when we finally come back. I mean, if you think back on how Sora usually reacts in regards to Riku's safety, isn't this like underwhelming? And I'm not saying the focus should only be on Riku here, but I would have appreciated at least a centered shot on Riku smiling at Sora or something. And whether this is intentional or not is up for debate, but I thought it was worth pointing out just in case, because something suspicious is surely happening here. Remind basically confirms this for us. I would say it does an interesting way of reminding the audience of what we've already forgotten. But before we get into the implications of Remind, I would like to preface with a quote from Nomura in regards to Remind's influence on KH3. Does it influence or rework anything in the main KH3 game? The story of KH3 itself hasn't changed. You play it after finishing KH3, so it doesn't influence anything. So I take it that story-wise, Remind doesn't make any sort of significant adjustments or changes to the base story. The plot points, both obvious and implied, that are introduced in KH3 remain the same. I probably don't need to tell you this, but Remind just adds more context to what we already know, or what we think we already know. When Sora returns to the final world for the second time, he says something very odd. Let's call it the biggest red flag if I've ever seen one.
Oh. Even with the power of waking, you can't just bring someone back.
But Kairi's heart hasn't been lost yet. She's still with us, right?
Maybe, but this time, I'm afraid the situation is a lot worse.
Hey, I've already restored 6 hearts. What's one more?
Sora says that he's restored 6 hearts, which is, absolutely wrong. He's actually restored 7 hearts. Riku, Donald, Goofy, Axel, Ventus, Aqua, and Mickey. Even in the tutorial, the disembodied voice says there are 7 hearts to save. So why is Sora saying 6? And no, it's not because he can't count. Not sure why they would want to call back to that joke here. But I also want to add that Chirithy also says that Sora has used the power of waking 6 times.
But that's not how it's supposed to work at all. The power of waking is meant to be used to wake and restore sleeping hearts, not to restore them after they've completely faded away from existence. You've done that 6 times before, and as a result, you've managed to greatly alter the course of history itself. You've broken a nature taboo.
Nature...
A forbidden act.
Now, when I first thought about what Chirithy said, I was like, oh, well, if Sora was wrong, then Chirithy should have corrected him. But then I realized that Chirithy isn't some omniscient being who can really confirm that or not, and this might just be Chirithy taking Sora's word for it. However, I still think it's meant to emphasize the glaring discrepancy between Sora's memory and what actually happened. So back to our question. Why does Sora think he's only restored 6 hearts? Well, that's easy. The tear in the fabric of time. Like Chirithy said, after Sora restored everyone's hearts, he altered history, making it so that their defeat never happened. And this created a tear in the timeline. And when there's a tear in something, there's, well, a hole. And not just a hole in the timeline, but also a hole in your memory. And not just Sora's memory, but everyone's memory. Now, I'm no science expert, so I'm not sure if that's actually how it works, but it makes sense, doesn't it? And that's what seems to be shown in Remind.
The heart you have now, it already existed during that time. It went back into that past earlier. Nothing can change that fact. The place where you'll return is the tear in the fabric of time that was created when you changed your destiny, then changed it once again.
We found you! Aqua!
Whoa!
Terra, we found you!
Terra, please say you're in there.
What gives, Aqua?
I know that you're not him. Now let our friend go!
Did I pass through the tear?
Remind shows everybody dying for the third time, and for some strange reason, it stops right after Sora's breakdown. It completely skips Riku's words of encouragement and his sacrifice, and the next scene we get is Sora standing on his heart station looking pretty out of it. So, there you have it. Sora's memory of Riku's sacrifice was lost to the tear, and I want to acknowledge that there could be another reason why Sora may have forgotten Riku's sacrifice, but I'll get to that later so we don't get derailed too much. So, this was the easy part. Sora changed history, created a tear, and because of that, he forgot about Riku's sacrifice and believes he's only saved 6 hearts. I feel like I don't need to really convince many people of that, but there are still questions I want answers to. Like, why is this a thing in the first place? What is the narrative importance of Sora forgetting Riku's sacrifice? What difference does it make? If he did remember, I'm sure everything would still play out the same, right? Well, most likely not. And that's what I actually want to go in depth about. Fair warning, this is where my overthinking skill gets pushed to its max, but I promise there's at least a couple of sensible points in here. First, let's talk about the order of defeat and restoration. Riku is the last to die and the first to be saved, and I think there's something we can glean from that. But I'm gonna lay everything out first. The order of everyone getting swept up by the darkness is as follows: Aqua, Ventus, Kairi, and Axel, with an asterisk because we do see her again, so you could say she's second to last too. And then Mickey, Donald, and Goofy. And the order in which Sora saves them is Riku, Aqua, Goofy, Donald, Ventus, Mickey, Axel, and Kairi. Another asterisk for her though, since he doesn't restore her heart this time around. And if I remember correctly, if you try to go outside of this order when restoring them, the game blocks you and you restart until you go to the next closest portal. Something like that. So the devs obviously want you to go on a fixed path, but you can see that the order of defeat does not determine the order that Sora saves them. So it's not like, oh, well, we see Riku and Olympus first because he was the last person Sora saw, and thus there's no real connection between him showing up in Olympus, and it's just a matter of happenstance. So really, Sora could have found him in any world. No, I think Riku showing up in Olympus specifically is very much intentional. Though I'm not going to say the devs are trying to match everyone with a world that makes sense for them as a character either. Maybe I'm not thinking hard enough, but to me, I see no thematic relation between Mickey and the Tangled world. But who knows, I could be missing something. And another note is that we don't go to each world in the order that we do throughout the game either. For instance, we restore Aqua's heart second, but she's in the Pirates of the Caribbean world, and that's one of the last worlds we go to. So it's not, oh, well, Olympus is the world we visited first, so yeah, of course Riku's going to be there. Again, happenstance, because if we went to another world first, then he would be there instead. No, it has to be Olympus. And I know it may sound contradictory when I say this is intentional for Riku, but unintentional for others. But all I'm saying is that Riku is a special little lad, and Olympus was reserved just for him. And if you remember the connections I made earlier, you already know why I feel this way. Plus, no other character could replace his position because it would greatly affect what the audience is meant to conclude. Let me try to explain. For funsies, let's say it was Axel who Sora forgot. What sense would that make? Axel is great and all, but I don't really see the point behind him being forgotten, and by Sora especially. It would imply that there's something important in relation to Axel that Sora has to remember for the sake of the plot, which just doesn't seem likely based on the direction of the story. But Riku, the deuteragonist, Sora's best friend, the boy still shrouded in mystery, he just seems to be the most fitting choice, right? Now, what if Sora forgot everyone? Or what if it was Kairi, another important person in Sora's life? Those circumstances would incite significant narrative attention, but obviously if you swap Riku out or put more people in the mix, that would drastically change the events and dialogue thereafter, and also make Sora's memory loss very apparent. Now, let's talk about that light in the tunnel. The light leads directly to Riku and Olympus. However, with everyone else, we have to go through portals. And keep in mind that the Olympus world also has a portal, so Sora didn't necessarily have to reach it by light. It's also strange that we don't see this light again until Sora is on his way back to the KBG. And guess who's on the other side? So this light seems to have a direct source and a source that's movable. And if the light was simply a means to reach the worlds, then why would it lead to Olympus itself rather than whatever that space is with all the portals? Or why wouldn't we keep following the light instead of having to go through a dark corridor every time we leave a world? So that light must only appear due to special circumstances. I hope by now you get why I'm saying all of this is meant to be Riku specific. Okay, before we move on from this bit, I think it's important to consider young Xehanort's warning to Sora in San Francisco. He tells Sora that he's been using the power waking wrong and that he has already paid the price. And outside of losing his powers and disappearing, he could already be hinting at the tear that Sora has just created by saving his friends. And because of that tear, Sora loses some memories. Hence, he's already paid the price, and we can see the consequences of his actions as soon as he returns to the tunnel. The bottom of the abyss, it seems like, because at this point, Sora has already forgotten about saving Riku's heart. Someone also brought up how in a certain frame with young Xehanort, you can see a sign on the building with what looks to be a solar eclipse, and next to it in Japanese it reads Corona, which is the light around the sun. Sun symbolism. And sun equals light. A light being eclipsed. Well, who knows if that frame was on purpose or not, but I thought it would be fun to bring up. The point is that it seems to be important for this scene with young Xehanort to happen here of all places. I can understand Olympus being emphasized, but San Francisco I'm not too sure about, other than the fact that it's a world that most resembles Quadratum. More foreshadowing? Perhaps. Another thing I want to note is that because Sora forgets about Riku's sacrifice, we don't get any insight into what exactly Riku is feeling during his last moments before his defeat, nor do we get any commentary from Sora about those feelings, which is strange given how important this scene is.
In order to not stray too far from the true power of waking, you'll enter and pass through the hearts of the Guardians until you reach Kairi's heart. Every emotion that each of the Guardians felt, sadness, anxiety,
that you're not him.
fear, kindness,
Now let our friend
everything they saw, and everything that they felt then, you'll clear a way through it, traverse across their hearts, and dive ever deeper inside.
Gee, I wonder what Riku was feeling at that moment.
I remember my first time here. I was so scared. But now my doubts and fears are gone. If anything, I feel exhilarated. And it's not because there's darkness in me. I know too well what that rush is like. This is different. And it's not adrenaline either. I know Aqua needs us, but I'm ready. I'm in control now. Maybe it's because you're with me this time.
It's not me. I think it's because you finally found inside you that special strength to protect what matters.
What?
Sometimes you care so much for somebody that other feelings disappear. And then there's no room for fear or doubt.
So if it's not fear or doubt, I sure wonder what other significant emotion Riku could be feeling during such an important scene. Maybe a certain emotion that Sora doesn't quite understand yet. Also, a friendly reminder that in relation to the in-game timeline, Dream Drop Distance just happened. And although what Mickey says can be taken generally, at least in the English localization, it's also very, very likely he's alluding to Sora here. If Riku finally found that special strength to protect what matters, when and how do you think he discovered that? And yes, that's rhetorical too. Anyway, there's no reason outside of Riku's sacrifice being missing from the timeline, so I shouldn't have been able to dive into Riku's heart and feel what he felt, especially when he's facing the demon tide. And yet, it seems the devs had to make sure to show us Riku's heart station officially, which is why Sora still had to follow that connection in the end. But we don't get any insight here either. But maybe we can guess. Alright, it is now time to get into our supplemental material, aka stuff I wanted to bring up as I made certain points, but couldn't because I didn't want to accidentally go down any unnecessary rabbit holes. Now, the Kingdom Hearts novels are not 100% canon, and I honestly don't like using them as hard evidence as much as I want to, but I do think the Cage 3 novel is worth mentioning for some additional context. So Riku's sacrifice in the novel is basically the same as the game and isn't explained any differently, but we do get some interesting insight into Sora's conversation with the Nameless Star. While he's talking to her, he can't seem to remember who she reminds him of, which is odd because we don't really get those thoughts from Sora in the game. In particular, the novel says this: her strong conviction reminded Sora of someone. But who? Who did she remind him of? It's a lot like Aqua, but there's someone else. Remember what I said earlier when we talked about the reasoning behind Riku's failure to protect Sora from the demon tide, about showing off his strong conviction? I feel like this extra detail isn't just something to fill out the novel, but maybe it's actually a secret detail we may not have picked up on in the games. In the game, Sora tells the Nameless Star that a friend of mine looked me in the eye and said, "You don't believe that." He doesn't mention Riku by name, but the audience just knows who he's talking about because that's literally what Riku said. But it's interesting that Sora doesn't say something like, "my friend Riku." Instead, he refers to him vaguely as a friend of mine. Now, this could be because Sora's just meeting the Nameless Star and he isn't just going to go name dropping people to a stranger. What's more interesting, though, is that in the Japanese translations, he more or less says, "I know someone like that, who doesn't give up." And he uses what people have said to be an impersonal, feminine-leaning pronoun, which obviously doesn't match up with Riku or the extent of their relationship. So it's almost as if Sora has already started to forget Riku's sacrifice at this point. And mind you, Sora doesn't usually have trouble recalling certain aspects of Riku or events involving him when comparing Riku to other people, like Elsa or Rapunzel. It also brings me back to what I said earlier about another reason why Sora might have forgotten his sacrifice. That reason being that seeing Riku dying fucked him up so bad emotionally that he repressed the memory. Now, personally, I don't think this is the case, but I wanted to acknowledge it, and I can't deny the fact that the Japanese translation has some interesting implications. But I'm no Japanese expert, so make sure to look into it yourself if you want. There's actually a link down below that goes over the Japanese translations in more depth, which might be helpful. I also want to quickly throw in another Nameless Star parallel to Riku that I realized way too late in the script. But after Sora mentions wanting to help her out, she advises him to see the task before him first, which sounds kind of similar to when Riku told Sora that he had to get the Pyro waking first before coming to the rescue in the Realm of Darkness. But anyway, whether Sora has already forgotten about Riku's sacrifice at this point or not, we're meant to notice the glaring parallels between Nameless Star and Riku. Another slight difference in the novel from the games is that Sora is certain that the light in the tunnel after he leaves the final world for the first time is Riku. Specifically, he thinks to himself, "that light off in the distance, it has to be Riku." In the game, Sora calls Riku's name, so these thoughts match up. And just like in the game, he credits Kairi as the light thereafter, and there are still no remarks at any point that explain why Sora changes this assumption. The novel also has Sora clearly making a connection between his memories of the acts of true love, or true love sacrifices, and Kairi, who kept him from fading away. According to Sora, if it weren't for Kairi, he wouldn't have made it back at all. But if you think about it, those Princess of Heart memories also apply to Riku too. I mean, he did sacrifice himself for Sora. Also, in Jimmy's journal, it says, "A heart of light, so long as it retains even the faintest glow, will always rise to banish the darkness, as sure as dawn sweeps away the night." And guess who dawn is commonly associated with? But it probably doesn't mean anything, right? Okay, fast forward a bit to the Remind section of the novel. At the point where Sora gets to the tear, he thinks, "this was when the despair got to me too, when I lost my friends and completely broke down. After this, I met Charity and went to go find everyone's hearts, right?" Well, we know that in the game, Riku's sacrifice happens right after Sora's breakdown, and then he ends up in the final world. So yeah, this further points to Sora forgetting Riku's sacrifice. And the little right at the end means he doesn't seem 100% confident in this memory. It's a small detail, but it contextualizes that little blank stare we get in the game. Alright, I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover in terms of scene dissection, so here are my closing thoughts. So if it's true that Sora forgot Riku's sacrifice, will Sora ever remember? The answer is obviously yes, or else what would be the point? When he does remember, I think Sora is going to come to at least 3 important revelations. Number 1, Riku was the one to give him the words of encouragement that he references in the Nameless Star conversation. His words are what helped Sora keep going after being swallowed by the darkness. Number 2, Riku's sacrifice helped revive him, and the memories he sees before returning to the KBG with Kairi is actually his heart remembering Riku's sacrifice. The mind may forget, but the heart doesn't. And lastly, number 3, Riku is the light in the darkness. With Sora forgetting Riku's sacrifice, he wouldn't remember calling out to Riku, the light responding to him, the light leading directly to Riku, Riku being in Olympus, the home of the gods. He doesn't remember any of that, so he attributes the light in the darkness to Kairi instead. So if more or less these are the important things Sora should come to realize, I wonder why these revelations have to even be revelations. We are all well aware that Riku is important to Sora and vice versa, and they love to help each other out, so why is it so obscured? Why make it a big deal? It's not like Sora knowing all this would necessarily affect the outcome of KH3, or would it? I don't know. Sora would still end up misusing the power waking and disappearing, right? So I can only think that there's something very important about Riku that Sora shouldn't know yet. Maybe he'll find out in Kingdom Hearts 4. Oh, and if you're wondering if Riku will ever remember his own sacrifice, well, maybe. I would say that it's more important for Sora to remember than Riku, because I'm sure Riku would find out and he would just be like, oh, okay, sounds about right. Unless there were actually some repercussions on his end. It could have something to do with Way to the Dawn breaking or Yazora's similar appearance to Riku, but I'm not 100% confident in the explanations for these just yet. Anyway, one thing for certain is that Sora and we, the audience, are meant to reevaluate what happens in Kingdom Hearts 3. So if anything I said hasn't convinced you that at least a little something is going on here, well, I don't know what to tell you. It's like they're putting neon signs everywhere. Now, what does this all mean for future games? How is this going to influence Sora's character and actions in the future? Well, I would have to go a little deeper into some topics that don't really have a place in this video. Mainly because we'll be here 5 hours, so I'll leave it at that. But I will say that Sora remembering Riku's sacrifice and him also remembering the events of Chain of Memories will most likely go hand in hand. And that makes me very excited for KH4 and beyond. Well, that's all I have for you today. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you want, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye! Oh, and one last reminder.
The truth is what you see with your eyes, not what you hear.